Welcome to OSDU Data Platform Application Developer Training. Today, I'm going to speak about two services, the entitlements and legal. Basically, they provide data security and compliance on the OSDU ecosystem. There are various scenarios when you need to apply access rules. For example, you sell a set of data to someone, or you share a piece of data under an agreement or contract. Or you have to restrict access to match your company's internal rules or legal requirements. Or perhaps you want to protect a dataset by user country due to sanctions. So for these purposes, you should use entitlement service to manage data access. And of course, it is data owner's responsibility to define access rules. And now let's move to a specific access control approach that is used in OSDU. At the moment, there are two services dealing with access rules, the entitlements and legal. The entitlement service restricts access to OSDU resources. The legal defines the legal status of data. And you should use both. We will take a look at each of them in more detail. But they have some limitations. So in future, OSDU is going to put a policy service into operation. It is already implemented and the demo version is available. The policy service allows to apply dynamic policy checks. Follow the link down below to get more information about it. Let's start with the entitlement service. The entitlement service runs an access check whenever a user tries to reach a service or a data resource. Since the entitlement service authorizes the user every request, it is important to form an overall perspective of this service. In general, the entitlement service provides a role-based access control for OSDU, and it's probably one of the most popular ways to secure data access. Basically, RBAC assumes that each user is associated with a specific role, and a role is associated with a specific set of permissions. Also, a system may have a set of rules to grant specific permissions to users. For example, if we assign the creator role to the user B, that user will have the create, read, and update privileges. And the user A with the admin role also has the delete privilege into the system. But in fact, OSDU employs group instead of roles. And it is group membership that grants privileges to user. So you can regard a group as a substitute for a role in OSDU. At the same time, a group may also be a substitute for a permission because there are several group types in OSDU, and each group type serves its specific purpose. Now, let's explore the group types. The first type of group is service groups. A service group defines access to a service for users or service accounts. Basically, you may take a service group as a permission granting access to a specific service. For instance, if a user is a member of a search service group, this user has access to the search service endpoints. Service groups are created during the service installation, so you don't need to have to create them manually, but you should add users so that they can reach the service. The next group type is data groups. Data groups define access to specific records. You can also call them documents. Each document has the ACL property. ACL stands for Access Control List. The property contains two lists, viewers and owners. Viewers are allowed only to read records from the search or storage service, while owners can create, read, update, or delete records. So to have access to a record, a user must be a member of a group listed in ACL or ACL's property. Moreover, it is the data owner's responsibility to create data groups, assign them to records, and add members to the groups. To summarize, data and service groups are associated with specific resources, and it may be quite difficult to manipulate access permissions with the full set of groups. But you can create a user group instead and aggregate several groups into one. In other words, user groups may become a member of a service group or data group. In the diagram, the user inherits access to the both data, resources, and service. So, a user group is a specific role that grants a set of permissions to the user. As a result, you can create hierarchy of groups. Next thing you need to know is the naming convention. But before moving to it, you should learn that OSDU support multi-tenancy and for these purposes uses partitions. Typically, instances are shared across partitions, and each tenant is associated with its own partition. It means that a company has its own tenant for storing data, schemas, and groups. In this module, groups define access rules for users, and you can regard a partition as a separate, isolated environment. Now I'm going to speak about the group naming convention. Basically, the group name looks like an email address. Here, we have the naming convention for data groups. Those for other group types are quite the same. The name starts with the group type, then there are the resource name and the permission type. The second part of the name holds the data partition and domain. You will use the group name in API requests while managing a group and its members. And the name must be unique across OSDU instance. So to manage groups and groups member, you should use Entitlements API. Here is an example of the request to create a user group. You should provide the name and description of the group in JSON format and send it to Entitlements API endpoint. A group member may have either roles, owner, or member. The member role grants all privileges provided by the group. Along with that, the owner can add and remove groups members. For example, as group's owner, you will be able to add new user to this group or remove user from there. The role is assigned to the user during the Add User to List of Members request. Also, the owner role is assigned to the requester during the group creation. In this screenshot, you can see the request to assign the member role to the user. The role property defines the grant privilege. Now, I'm going to talk about the legal service. You may also call it compliance service. As entitlement, it restricts access to data. The legal tag describes a record legal status, and each record must contain at least one legal tag. In general, you may say that a legal tag defines how data is ingested and consumed under a contract or legislative rule. The legal tag is validated during the data ingestion, but at the moment, legal tags don't enforce consumption rules. But for this purpose, you can use the policy service. So before ingesting any data into the system, you should upload the legal tag to the legal service. There are a set of properties describing the legal tag status, such as the country of origin and the expiration date. Find more information on these properties by the link down below. And now let's move to more specific example of usage. Let's switch to the API request demonstration. I'm going to create data group and assign a member to it. To do it, you will need a proper level of permissions. So if you don't have them, contact your cloud administrator to add you to the required groups. The first request creates data example viewers group. And you can see that you only have to put the group name and description in the request body. In the body, no data partition and domain needed since data partition is specified as a header. Now the group is created. At the next step, I'm assigning a user to this group. I store the user ID in variables. So here you can see in curly brackets. So the user is now a member of the group. So now let's try to create a record with the data example viewers group in the ACLs property. And please keep in mind that you should assign users to one of the groups listed in ACLs to give them permissions to see this record. Now the record is uploaded. Now let's use legal service and try to create a legal tag. Here you can see a list of parameters that you should populate to ingest a legal tag. The name is internally used to link a record with this legal tag. Other parameters describe the legal tag itself. And please note that the data partition is added in the first part of the name. After I upload a legal tag to the service, I can create a record with this legal tag. I have filled the legal tags property with newly created legal tag. And now the record is created. In general, ACLs and legal tags are stored inside records, so you can easily get this information from the record requested from storage. You can find more example requests for entitlements and legal service in OSDU test collection. Thank you.